hello there and good day. Thank you so much for joining me at Dystopian Report, the place where we talk about the nightmare world we found ourselves living in. I'm your host, Jesse Pullman, and today is October 25th, going into 26th, 2025. It's about 11:38 p.m. as I start this recording. I want to start by saying that last weekend's No Kings Rally went really well. But we have stuff to discuss. As you saw in the headline, we're doing a medium dive on the Department of Education, Linda McMahon, who is the head of the Department of Education, and some stuff affiliated with her and her life's work, so to speak. So, I don't want to preamble too much, but the Department of Education is a thing which exists. It is a thing which is under threat. It's a thing which does a lot of good work, and it's a thing which we very much need. That is in severe danger. So I'm also going to disclaimer that I am running under a slight head cold. So if I sound a little different or if I'm a little sniffly or I reach for a tissue, I apologize. I'm just doing the best I can and I'm just trying to get this out. I know it's not Wednesday, but hey, this is how we do things. So if this is your first time doing one of these medium dives with me, I basically just read the Wikipedia article on a couple of things, and these things are connected, and you follow me throughout as we read them. We don't read the entire things, because sometimes the things themselves can be, like, long, like in the case of Linda McMahon's biography. It's very long. We're going to hit on some essential points. I don't have notes in front of me. I don't have, like, a list of things where it's just like, oh, I must hit this, I must hit this. So if I miss something, I want you to leave a comment and let me know what you think. And most of all, we're coming at this from a political dystopian standpoint, not an entertainment standpoint. So the things that people do for entertainment is great. I have, I used to be a big WWF fan back when it was the WWF when I was a little kid. But I'm not a little kid anymore. And as much as I respect the athleticism that goes into professional wrestling, we are not here to talk about professional wrestling, except as it applies to the dystopian political standpoint. So I don't want you to feel like I'm attacking you for being a wrestling fan, although I would suggest maybe check out other wrestling agencies. Just be advised that this is going to touch on that a little bit, and it's not going to feel good. And we're going to be discussing some topics that involve very unfortunate things. I'll try to include a trigger list in the video description, but this is Dystopian Report. We talk about dystopian things, and Linda McMahon has been involved in some very inappropriate contact scandals, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So that's where we're going with this. So if you have any problems with that, this is your chance to know about, and just know she's not very good. Last thing to note, I was asked to to talk about McMahon as a former educator. I'm a social studies ELA teacher by trade, and I did that for a while. But the truth is, as a teacher, there's not much for me to say about the Department of Education, which I know sounds weird, but it's the United States Department of Education, and I didn't deal with it that much, except insofar as what it funds. But we'll get into that. And I was asked to look into this by Too Technical, so here's one for you, buddy. The U.S. Department of Education is a cabinet-level department of the United States government originating in 1980. There are previous incarnations of the Department of Education, but the main thing to note is that the department began operating on May 4th, 1980, having been created after the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was split into the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services for the Department of Education Organization Act, which President Jimmy Carter signed into law on October 17th, 1979. So there were previous iterations of educational services through the federal government. The Department of Education was not created out of whole cloth in 1980. It's existed since the Reconstruction era, basically. Yeah. It's was that even the Reconstruction era, or was that during the Civil War? I can't remember. My brain is failing. Okay. We're doing this not live, but pre-recorded, but also, like, I don't edit very much, so if I get dates wrong, let's just look up U.S. Civil War real quick. It's 65, so Reconstruction. I was right. Okay. Its official department abbreviation is ED, not DOE. I know in New York City, which is where I taught, it's DOE. It's ED on the federal level, or DOED, because the Department of Energy is DOE. They handle nuclear weapons, which we're not really doing much with right now because we have a shutdown government. We'll get into that. The Department of Education is administered by the United States Secretary of Education. In 2021, it had more than 4,000 employees, the smallest staff of the cabinet agencies, and a 2024 budget of $268 billion, up from $14 billion when it was established in 1979. So right there is something interesting, right? It had a budget in 2024 of $268 billion. That's only up $14 billion, not even 10% from when it was established. That means that as inflation has grown, the amount of money that was given out has basically been reduced. So the strength of the dollar has weakened. The same dollar value is worth less. In 2025, the department's budget was about 4% of total U.S. federal spending. During Donald Trump's second term, the Department of Government Efficiency announced it would shrink the Department of Education's workforce by half, and Trump signed an executive order on March 20th aimed at closing the department to the maximum extent allowed by law. Remember, Congress creates this stuff, so Trump can't just shut it down on his own. He has to get Congress to do it. The Supreme Court has allowed layoffs to proceed on July 14th. That's the latest big update. What is the point of the DOE? DOED. I'm going to call it the DOE by accident because, like I said, I'm a New York City teacher. It's the DOE. It's just it's hardwired in my brain. So if I accidentally call it the DOE, I am 99% likely referring to the Department of Education, not the Department of Energy. Like, I'm sorry if I make that mistake. It's my bad. The department identifies 4 key functions. 1, establishing policies on federal financial aid for education and distributing as well as monitoring those funds. 2, collecting data on America's schools and disseminating research. 3, focusing national attention on key issues in education and making recommendations for education reform. 4, prohibiting discrimination and ensuring equal access to education. The Department of Education is a member of the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness and works with federal partners to ensure proper education for homeless and runaway youth in the United States. So there is a whole bunch of history here. We're not worried about that. Why? You can read it on your own. I encourage you to read it on your own. Don't take anything I say for granted. Read it on your own. But also, a lot of this just isn't relevant. Like, the No Child Left Behind Act matters. Don't get me wrong. All of that stuff matters. But it's not relevant for the conversation as to what we're dealing with. We are dealing with efforts to close the agency, the department, right? Republicans have been trying to close the agency back in the 1980s, right? But Project 2025, a Heritage Foundation policy plan, deals heavily with the closure of the Department of Education, mass privatization of public schools, and ending subsidized and free school lunches, because students learn better when they're starving, right? No, they don't. The plan includes provisions for the layoffs of millions of public employed teachers. Trump's second-term policies have been compared to Project 25. What a surprise, it's what he's doing. Multiple polls in February and March 2025 show that roughly 2/3 of Americans oppose the idea. So, 2/3 of Americans say, don't close the Department of Education. Well, on March 3rd, Linda McMahon, of 2025, I should be clear, was sworn in as the nation's 13th Secretary of Education. Trump emphasized that McMahon's primary objective would be to close the Department of Education, stating, quote, I want her to put herself out of a job, unquote. McMahon echoed Trump's comments, stating that the department was not needed when asked directly if the United States needed the department. I saw a recent Fox News article, which I will not do the honor of giving a click, which mentions that during this government shutdown, McMahon is talking about how this shutdown proves we don't need the Department of Education. So, yeah. Layoffs, impacts, organization, all important stuff. but not really too relevant because it's about the politics of it and not the actual what this department does. So let's go back to what this department does real quick. Oh yeah, and I should add, in February 2025, the Department of Education established an End DEI portal to take the complaints about DEI programs in schools. The administration also warned of cuts in federal funding for universities that continue with DEI programs. So yes, it's worth noting that, like, one of the things that the department is supposed to do is, right? Let's go back up to its stuff. Establish policies for federal financial aid for education as well as distributing and monitoring those funds. Okay. Let's go back down. In 2023, the department's budget was $274 billion, which included funding for children with disabilities from the IDEA law, pandemic recovery, early childhood education, Pell Grants, Title I, work assistance, among other programs. So right there, you have a kind of a central conflict, right? Trump is anti-DEI, diversity. Oh, what's that second word? Equity. My brain is failing me. Like I said, I'm sick. And inclusion programs, DEI. He wants to end DEI. One of the things the Department of Education does, I have to go full screen to stress this. One of the things the Department of Education does, one of its key responsibilities, which is near and dear to my heart as a student with special needs back in the day before that was really a thing, is that the Department of Education is in charge of managing and funding and supervising assistance to school districts that need help paying for their children with special needs. In other words, if you have a student who has a learning disability, some or all of the funding for that student's special needs is going to come from the Department of Education. Have I made myself clear? If I am wrong about this, leave a comment, let me know. But that's the deal, my dear, as Shakira once said. Whenever, wherever there is a student with special needs, the Department of Education funds that student. So when I was a student with special needs, I had a fine motor skill impairment. I can't handwrite. My handwriting is chicken scratch. It hurts to handwrite. And I was the sort of student who could tell you a story, as you can see by the fact I'm telling you a story right now, but I couldn't write you a story. So I grew up around the time laptops started becoming more and more plausible. They were big bricks at the time, but they were plausible. And I got a laptop for my schoolwork, which I was embarrassed to use for a long time because it singled me out as a student with a need. But the compromise to that was I got to take my tests because I didn't really need notes in high school. I was pretty good at just memorizing the content of most things. I would get copies of other students' notes, like Xerox copies. I think the students got like paid for that or got graded for that or something. I know in college you got like scribe pay. But I would also get the chance to go to the computer lab for tests. So if I had to write an essay at the end of a test, I would go to the computer lab and write the essay. That would be my disability accommodation. And it's that reason that I was able to pass high school and college. So I would never have succeeded at those things if I did not have access to disability accommodations, paid for, in part, by the Department of Education. So, trying to take DEI out of education, I is inclusion. I is inclusion! What more is there to say? Inclusion is key to, like, special education. I can't. Anyway, let's get into Linda McMahon. She is an American politician, business executive, and former professional wrestling executive who served as the 13th United States Secretary of Education since 2025. A member of the Republican Party, she previously served as the 25th Administrator of the Small Business Administration from 2017 to 2019. So she does technically have qualifications to be a major player in a political sphere. McMahon, along with her husband Vince McMahon, founded sports entertainment company Titan Sports, later World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, where she worked as the president and later chief executive from 1980 to 2009. During this time, the company grew from a regional business in the Northeast to a large multinational corporation. Among other things, she initiated the company's civic programs, Get REAL and Smack Down Your Vote. Okay. Does the rest of this matter? Not really. I mean, other than that, she was nominated. How does that make sense? On November 19th, 2024, McMahon was nominated to... Okay, I guess she could be nominated while he was in transition, but... she was confirmed to the Senate by a vote of 51 to 45. I really am tempted to dig into that vote and see who voted what. But let's do it. There's a name I'm looking for. There's a name on this page I am looking for. Wow, Fetterman actually voted no. There are no Democrat votes. She was a Republican party line vote. Okay. Cool. So Linda McMahon is from a conservative Baptist family. She converted to Roman Catholicism in her later years. She met Vince McMahon at 13. He was 16. Age difference, but not terrible. Although they met young, so he had ample opportunity to make impressions upon her. She has... she got a bachelor's degree in French from East Carolina University. So she's like a French translator. That's the thing she did. She also trained as a paralegal in the probate department and studied intellectual property rights. They have 2 kids. Shane and Stephanie McMahon. They own Titan Sports, right? Which is the WWE, which is the World Wrestling Entertainment. It's the biggest wrestling entertainment franchise in the world. Think Hulk Hogan, think Macho Man Randy Savage. They weren't necessarily exclusive to the company, but yeah. On September 16th, 2009, Linda McMahon resigned from her position as CEO of WWE, which she was the CEO of, and left to run as a Republican in Connecticut. She lost. There was a whole federal investigation into the steroid use of WWE. Just a lot of controversies just having to do with like treatment of wrestlers, because like I know Hulk Hogan stopped them from unionizing. He ratted them out, if I recall correctly. It's had some interesting words that start with N too. It's weird, huh? It's weird how they all seem to group together. Chair shots. You can see a wrestler taking a chair shot to the head. I think that's the Undertaker bonking somebody. And like that's a staple of like wrestling. It's been discontinued. That's a good thing. Through the WWE, the McMahons were major donors to the Donald J. Trump Foundation, giving him $4 million in 2007 and $5 million in 2009. I don't even think he was a Republican at that point. I think he was a Democrat. She's been a Board of Trustees member for Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. She's supported many organizations, including the USO, Make-A-Wish, Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, Starlight Foundation. The sort of things that you would think would make a good person, but we'll get into why she's not a good person. So, Get REAL was designed to give positive message about education to young adults. The idea being, hey, this is 2006, let's educate some people. They had a nonpartisan voter registration campaign, Smack Down Your Vote, in August 2000. Cool. Sounds like a reasonable person. They began supporting the Special Olympics in 1986. Then we get to it. Sexual abuse lawsuit. In October 2024, McMahon was named as a defendant in a lawsuit accusing her husband, and the WWE of negligence regarding the Ring Boy scandal, in which multiple WWE personnel, including ring announcer Mel Phillips and executives Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin, either resigned or were dismissed in 1992 after being accused of sexually assaulting young boys. The lawsuit alleged that the McMahons fostered a culture of sexual abuse within the WWE. The lawsuit was paused by a federal judge in December 2024 pending the outcome of a legal challenge to a state law that could impact the case. The lawsuit was allowed to proceed in February 2025. In April 2025, McMahon filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit. She has denied the claims in the lawsuit. Pause on that. We're going to read more about the Ring Boy scandal in a bit. But we're up to her political career, which is, again, what we're really worried about. We're not worried about all of her charity work after the Ring Boy scandal. We're not worried about her early education. It matters, but it's not like mission critical for our purposes here, right? She was appointed to the State Board of Education of Connecticut by Governor Jody Rell in 2009, January, right? She sat on the Connecticut Board of Education for 1 year starting in 2009. She told lawmakers at the time she had a lifelong interest in education and once planned to become a teacher. She filled out a vetting questionnaire for the board position, stating she had a degree in education from East Carolina University in 1969, although her degree was actually in French. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting indeed? I'm so glad that I keep Ricola by my desk because I need one right now. My throat is giving out. I've been told I should go slower with these. I'm trying to do so, but I'm failing. So on September 16, 2009, McMahon announced her candidacy for U.S. Senator to represent the state of Connecticut. She did the billionaire thing where she said she would spend up to $50 million of her own money and refuse outside donations. She ran for the Republican nomination, campaigning on promises of lower taxes, fiscal conservatism, and job creation. She campaigned as socially moderate and identified herself as pro-choice while also opposing partial birth abortion, which isn't a thing, and federal funding for abortions, which should be a thing. She was accused of buying on the election. At the party convention, she received the most support, but someone else received enough votes to qualify for the ballot in the primary that was not actively campaigning. McMahon defeated her primary opponents, faced Richard Blumenthal in the general election, losing by 11.8 percentage points. She tried again in 2012. She was like, I lost, I'll do it again. And Joe Lieberman announced she was retiring, so she became the Republican Party for the favorite in 2012. She lost to Chris Murphy, marking her second consecutive defeat. Following her electoral defeats, McMahon committed herself to becoming a major Republican fundraiser and donor. She donated to groups such as American Crossroads and Ending Spending Fund and associated with Republican fellow donor Paul Singer. There's a 2016 Republican nomination process, it doesn't say what, but it seems to be the federal, presidential, began to gear up in early 2015. McMahon, Singer, and Charles Schwab, of all people, you might know that name as he's a big financial company, were among donors and prospective political candidates who attended a day-long meeting near Jackson, Wyoming that was hosted by TD Ameritrade founder Joe Ricketts and his son. It featured several Republican donors who favored same-sex marriage and immigration reform. Same-sex marriage reform is called getting rid of same-sex marriage. It's wrong. Now, Donald Trump is connected to this WrestleMania stuff, by the way. He made an appearance at WrestleMania in 2007. He's in the WrestleMania Hall of Fame. McMahon donated $5 million to Donald J. Trump Foundation as payment for the appearance. I believe that foundation was dissolved by court order in 2018 after various legal violations came to light. Well, guess what? In 2016, McMahon donated $6 million to Rebuilding America Now, a super PAC with the purpose of electing Trump as president. And she also funded, in 2015 and 2016, $1.2 million to Future 45, a super PAC which funded anti-Bernie Sanders, specifically, advertisements. So she worked for the Small Business Association, as I said earlier, under Donald Trump, which I mean, that sucks. McMahon was confirmed by the U.S. Senate on February 14th, 2017 by bipartisan vote of 81 to 19. So if you remember her second appointment to the federal government, the one where she's the Department of Education, that's 51 to 45. Party line vote. She previously was able to get bipartisan votes. That does indicate some kind of shift, right? You would think that indicates some kind of shift. Well, she was big in the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017, which was the first GOP tax scam. So there's that. I want to see something real quick. Okay. I just got a weird little thing on the screen, I think. It's not a dead pixel, is it? No, okay. She did stuff as the SBA. She left the SBA to work for Trump's re-election efforts and became the founding chairperson of the America First Policy Institute, a nonprofit conservative think tank founded in 2021 to promote an America First policy agenda. It's a pretty big position, actually. She helped raise $83 million for Trump's re-election campaign in 2020. She serves as chair of the board for America First Policy Institute, along with Vice Chair Larry Kudlow, who I was under the impression Larry Kudlow is a on-the-air journalist. So, well, he's a Fox News person, so he's really an entertainer, as they said in court. She was also co-chair of his second transition team. I have to turn my air conditioner on, excuse me. It's that time of year where the heat is on and then it gets too hot and the air conditioner has to go on to cool it down. That's unfortunate. I actually felt heat coming off the heater. That sucks. Hopefully the microphone isn't picking up too much air conditioning. McMahon has oversight over the American 250 Civics Education Coalition, a partnership of conservative organizations who are creating civics programming around the 250th anniversary of the United States. The coalition is led by the America First Policy Institute, which formerly employed McMahon. McMahon signed an ethics waiver allowing her to participate, acknowledging her conflict of interest as a former employee. So what does that tell you? Well, Linda McMahon. Let's Google her name real quick. See if any news has popped up. No, nothing really. So, all that really tells us, in the grand scheme of things, is that I have my light on. That's why you see a light above the Dystopian Report icon. And now that I notice it, it's really infuriating me. But I can't do much to stop that at this point, because that's my screw up. Yeah. It's just frustrating. And she's there for a reason. Her reason to exist is to get rid of the Department of Education. And we just have to kind of accept that that is their goal. Will they accomplish it? I don't know. That requires Congress to act. That requires Congress to sign off on abolishing the Department of Education. And right now, Congress isn't in session, or at least the House isn't in session, because Mike Johnson doesn't want to do his job. He wants to be on permanent vacation. I don't know. Let's get back to something different, though. Let's get back to the Ring Boy scandal. It's a sex scandal in WWF. Around allegations in the late 1980s and early 1990s. These teenage boys were sexually exploited. At the same time, they were suspected of supplying illegal steroids to their wrestlers. The original claims, by the way, just in case you're wondering, date back to 1992, when one such ring boy, Tom Cole, went public with allegations of sexual abuse against the WWF, which were initially broken in the New York Post by sports journalist Phil Mushnick on February 26, 1992. He was 13 when he started working for them. He was a runaway from a single-parent home, the kind of people that the Department of Education are supposed to be taking care of. A lot of the stuff on this page is really bad, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on it. You're welcome to read about it if you'd like. But, oh, Hulk Hogan's in steroids? Okay, cool. The FBI investigated and identified 10 potential victims, but did not press charges, and none of them were willing to testify to the nature of the one perpetrator's activities. Linda McMahon, as CEO from 1993 until her resignation in 2009. Incidentally, Vince McMahon was ousted as WWE CEO in 2022 after the WWE's board of directors found that McMahon had made hush money payments totaling $12 million to several women who alleged sexual misconduct against him. Geez, weird that these people are involved. So in Maryland, the Maryland Child Victims Act removed the statute of limitations for child sex cases. So 5 John Does sued the WWE, including its parent company, which is now TKO Holdings Group, and both Linda and Vince McMahon for their negligence, alleging that Phillips assaulted and groomed them at various points in the 1980s, that the McMahons knew or should have known about his actions, but instead knowingly fostered and allowed a culture of sexual misconduct to permeate the WWE. So, as I mentioned earlier, that stuff is still going on. That lawsuit is still ongoing. But it kind of shows what a person Linda McMahon is, that she's been put in charge of children more than once in her life. Have I made my point clear? Linda McMahon's a terrible person. And Linda McMahon should not have a role having anything to do with children, let alone supervising the dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion of a department that is dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Have I made my point clear? I hope I have. If you enjoyed this kind of deep dive, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about it, and let me know that you'd like to see more. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. The last video really did help the channel gain like 10 subscribers. I'm sort of surprised by that because it was stalemated at like 80-something for a while, and now it's at like 96. So thank you for being a part of this channel. If we do hit 100 by the end of the year, it's October 26th. It's 12:10 a.m. now. If we do hit 100 by the end of the year, I will rewatch Terminator 0 and I will write a dystopian report, the old school style of report. I'm sorry, not a report, dystopian review. Review is the cinematic literature review of this channel. I will do a dystopian review, which is where this whole channel started, of Terminator 0. Or if you really have something I'd rather do, if I know it, I'll do it. But I don't know much. So I might have to read something. I don't know, we'll see. If there was like a movement, like 100,000 people were like, do this book, I would do it, but hey, go ahead. Make me do a book. What do I care? I want to thank you all so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, or I should say, found it useful, please do hit the like, share, subscribe, friend, follow, or whatever buttons. Really just help the channel grow. It lets me know what you're watching so I can keep making more of it. I really do appreciate it from the very bottom of my heart. There are links to various stuff in the description of this video that will hopefully help. I will try to link all of these Wikipedia articles for your ease of perusal. Thank you all so much for joining me, and as always on this channel, pieces.